Okay, so continuing with our lessons, today we're going to start talking about the Pythagorean theorem. Now, this topic is very important. Okay, the concepts that we're going to talk about in this topic, okay, are going to help you for the rest of your mathematical lives, okay, because you're also going to use it with pre-calculus, calculus, algebra. You're going to use it for everything, okay, so it's important to understand this topic. Okay, now what we have on the board right now, okay, is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem is actually the formula that's already here. Okay, but we're going to get to that in a moment. Now, to understand the Pythagorean theorem, you need to understand different concepts. Okay, when we're using the Pythagorean theorem, we're talking about right angles. Okay, this is right angle trigonometry. Okay, so when we're talking about right triangles, we're talking about a triangle, okay, that has a right angle. Okay, remember that a right angle, according to geometry, is an angle that measures exactly 90 degrees. Okay, now, when we're talking about right triangles, okay, we're going to use two different methods to talk about the sides of the right triangle and the angles of the right triangle. Okay, to talk about the sides, okay, if we were going to talk about maybe the area, or if we're going to talk about, let's say, the perimeter, we're talking about the sides. Okay, so we're talking about the measurement of this side, the measurement of this side, and the measurement of this side. Okay, so in theory, this is a perfect right triangle. Okay, we have an angle that measures 90 degrees. Okay, we have two other angles. Okay, and we have the three parts. Okay. Now, when we're talking about a right triangle, okay, and we're talking about the sides of a triangle, this side, which looks the longest, okay, is called the hypotenuse. Okay? This side is called the adjacent side. And this side, it's called the opposite side. Okay? Because we're usually talking about this angle. Okay, so this angle, this is the opposite side. This is the adjacent. Remember that the definition of adjacent is that they touch. Okay, so this angle touches this side. It doesn't touch this side. That's why it's called opposite. Okay, and here we have the adjacent, and here we have the hypotenuse. Okay, now we're going to use two different ways of talking about the measurement of the sides and the measurements of the angles. Okay, now when we're talking about the measurement of the sides, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, which is technically our topic. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem, what the theorem itself, the formula itself is telling us, is that the measurement of side C to the square is equal to the measurement of side A to the square plus the measurement of side B to the square. Now, let's talk about those sides. Here we were only talking about adjacent, hypotenuse, and opposite. The hypotenuse is C. Okay, so this one comes here. Okay, whatever measurement we have here is this one. Okay, and between the other two, okay, since technically they are here, they are added together, we can say that A is adjacent and that the opposite is B. Okay? So what we're saying here is that the measurement of the hypotenuse, all of this side, is equal to this side to the square plus this side to the square. Okay? And this is a perfect right triangle. Okay? So to find out the measurement of the hypotenuse, we would need to take the opposite side to the square and add it to the adjacent side to the square. Okay? And that is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's say that we have the measurement of the adjacent side and we have the measurement of the opposite side. Okay, so we would take the adjacent, put it to the square, and add it to the opposite to the square, and then we would have the measurement exactly of the hypotenuse. Okay? Now, remember, right now we're only talking about the measurements of the sides. Okay? But what happens to the measurements of the angles? Okay? with the measurements of the angles, we're going to use these. Okay? We're going to use these terms, okay, or these functions, which are called sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay? So that means that we already have the measurement of one angle, right? So if we were to take the measurement, if we want, sorry, the measurement of this angle, that means that we're going to use the formula for sine. Okay? So the measurement of this angle would say that it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, so let's say that the opposite is 7, just as an example. Okay, let's say that this one is 7 and this one is 14, just as an example. Okay, so we would take this trigonometric function, okay, and we would put, okay, the sine of this angle, let's put it like this, the sine of this angle is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that means that it would be 7 over 14, which is the same as 1/2. Okay? So if we take our calculators, if you see the trigonometric functions on their calculators, you will see that we have sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay? And if you look at your calculators, on the top of the sine, cosine, and tangent, you have sine to the -1, cosine to the -1, and tangent to the -1. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay? But now we're just focusing on sines. Okay? So we would take the calculators and we would put sine of 1/2, and that would give us the measurement of this angle. Okay, let me put it as an example. So we would take sine of 1/2 okay, and that would give us a specific number. Okay, and that would be the measurement of that angle. Okay, but we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, this is just an example. Okay, right now we're only focusing on the Pythagorean theorem and the trigonometric functions. Okay? Okay. So, when we're talking about finding the angles for these, okay, the measurements of the angles, okay, we are talking about, okay, the measurement of this angle or this one, and this one we already know it's 9. Okay? Now, one important word that is going to help you when you're talking about trigonometric functions is this one, okay? And try to remember it. It sounds funny because it's not a word, but it will help you. It's called SOHCAHTOA, okay? SOHCAHTOA, okay? And the reason for this is that it's going to help you remember what goes with what, okay? And let me bring it here. This is where SOHCAHTOA comes from. Look. S for sine, O for opposite, H for hypotenuse. Look, sine, opposite over hypotenuse. Look at cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. C-A-H. C-A-H. And what is the tangent? The tangent is opposite over adjacent. T-O-A. T-O-A. Okay, so this word is very important because it can help you remember. What do we group with sine? Opposite, hypotenuse. What do we group with cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. What do we group with tangent? Opposite over adjacent. Okay, so SOHCAHTOA can help you a lot to remember what goes with sine, what goes with cosine, and what goes with tangent. Okay? Now, we have other trigonometric functions. Okay? We also have cosecant, we have secant, and we have cotangent. Okay? These are the ones that you can find in your calculators as -1, like cosine -1, sine -1, tangent -1. So this means that we have the cosecant, the secant, and the cotangent. Okay, and these are the opposites. The cosecant is the opposite of sine. So instead of having opposite over hypotenuse, we're going to have hypotenuse. Oh, sorry. Hypotenuse over opposite. The secant is the opposite of cosine. Okay, so that means that we have hypotenuse over adjacent. And the cotangent is the opposite of tangent, so that means that we have adjacent over opposite. Okay, so these are the trigonometric functions that we need to remember. Okay, and they are all going to help us during this topic. Okay, we're going to talk about the measurements of the hypotenuse, the measurements of the adjacent side, the measurements of the opposite side, okay, and we're going to find the measurements of the angles and of the sides. Okay, so this is why these trigonometric functions are very important. Okay, we also need to remember the Pythagorean theorem, okay, and remember that C, this one is the only one that's like really important. Okay, between the A and the B, you can place A for the B, or you can place opposite for the A. Technically, it doesn't matter, okay, because they are on this side, and add them together, and they're going to be letter C. But C needs to be clear. C is the hypotenuse, okay? It's the longer side of the right triangle, okay? Because we cannot place the hypotenuse here, because it would mess the whole thing up, okay? So the hypotenuse is very important to be clear that it's here, okay? And then we have this one that can be adjacent or the opposite. This one can be opposite or adjacent. It doesn't matter, because between them, adding them will bring us to the hypotenuse. Okay? And on this side, okay, remember, this is where we take the sines and the cosine and the tangent and the cosecant and the secant and the cotangent. These come from the measurements of the angles. Okay, so we'll get to those in a moment. Okay, so in this lesson, I just wanted to talk about these terms. Okay, remember the Pythagorean theorem is this one. C to the square, meaning the hypotenuse, is equal to the measurement of the A to the square plus B to the square. Okay, and remember this word, SOHCAHTOA. Okay, it will help you a lot. Okay, because by remembering SOHCAHTOA, then you can say S with the OH, C with the AH, and T with the OA. Okay? Perfect. Okay, so this lesson will not have any exercises. Okay, here I just wanted to discuss the terms for the Pythagorean theorem, sines, cosine, tangents, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. In the next video lesson, we will have some exercises, so make sure to check them out. But right now, we were only talking about terms. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know. This was only about terms.